Tom is senior lecturer here. I've just come to introduce Tom, who's your guest lecturer today. Professor Tom Kavanagh from the University of Colorado State University and Walden University.
Right.
Tom has a range of specialties in terms of both qualitative and quantitative research, restorative justice education, health science research. But the reason that Tom has a strong connection with Aotearoa is because of the work that he did at Waiwhatu University with Russell Bishop, the Te Kōtarutanga project. It's going back about 6 or 7 years ago.
Yes.
A number of years working with Russell Bishop. So he's very familiar with the context in Aotearoa and some of the issues that we face, but also his own experiences in the US and working in ethnic studies as well in the US. So I'm sure Tom will be very interesting and stimulating for today. So welcome, Tom. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Garrick. I appreciate that, and thanks. I'm impressed this many students are here on Friday afternoon. You know, at Colorado State, I wouldn't see anybody, so thank you. This is wonderful, and it's great to have Garrick. We're connected because his Auntie Nan adopted Monica and I, so we're connected that way. So I came to New Zealand originally in 2004, and I lived on the North Island up in Raglan. Anybody here from Raglan? Any surfers? Oh my gosh, nobody surfs. That's the surfing capital, as you probably well know. Have you been to Raglan? You have? Oh, good. Lovely town, isn't it? Yeah. So we lived there, my wife Monica and I, for 5 years, and really enjoyed it. And now we're back on a fellowship, visiting Maori and Indigenous Studies fellowship through the Erskine Foundation. So it's wonderful to spend some time on the South Island. We're looking forward to that. What I'm going to do in this first hour is talk to you about the importance of relationships, building and maintaining relationships as the key aspect of the work that we do with Maori and other Indigenous people, whether we're in health or whatever field that we're in. So I just want you to think about that, how important building relationships is as I go through this. What we tend to do in our work is be task-oriented. So we're focused on what's our task, not on building relationships. And what happens so often is we get so task-oriented that we forget the importance of the relationship building. And if you ever work with Maori, you know the importance of the pōwhiri, and that's the welcoming. And the reason for the pōwhiri is to build those relationships before we start the meeting, the hui. That's to make those connections and to decide how we're going to work together, whether we can work together, whether we can have a relationship. What we tend to do in the Western world is jump right into the task and skip over the relationship building. And that happens in the health field all the time. Any of you that have been to the doctor's office or to a clinic, you know what I'm talking about. They rush in, they ask you a few questions, and they rush out. Very few doctors take the time to know you as a person. They know your symptoms, they know what treatment they prescribe, but do they know you? And my guess is that your favorite doctor is the one that takes some time to get to know you. And that's what we're talking about in the health field. They not only care about your health, but they care about you as an individual. That's critical for working with Maori and Indigenous people. that you put the relationships first. And as you work in the health field, if you keep that in mind as being uppermost, you're in the right space. So why is this all important? Well, what I'm suggesting is that the population and the number of diverse people and ethnically diverse indigenous people in the world is changing dramatically. This year, for the first time, students of color outnumbered white students in the United States. White values, middle-class values, have dominated American schools since the beginning. And now there's a real need to shift that thinking. In fact, there's new policy coming out of the federal government all about how we have to shift to a multicultural lens. The same thing is happening in New Zealand, and it's happening in other countries. Health field is going to be very much impacted by this. And in the South Island, it's particularly important to keep notice of the impact of Ngāi Tahu. They're an incredibly important economic force in this country, and particularly in the South Island. And they are very important in the field of health. They have a number of assets related to the field of health. So ignoring the influence of Māori is really ignoring the reality of their influence. Economists in New Zealand have said that Māori are the most important indicator of the future of the economy of New Zealand because of their wealth and the wealth they've developed. So that's why we need to think about how can we create a different culture together? How can we have relationships that are caring and nonviolent? And how can we help those people that are marginalized and minoritized and racialized? Because we are going to be working with a lot of those people. So that's the focus of our session this afternoon, is relationships. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, talk to you a little bit more about the relationships, and then what we'll do is I'm going to actually have you practice a relationship building activity that you could even use yourself. You could use it with your friends, you could use it at your workplace, or wherever. The word in Māori that we use for building and maintaining relationships is, I don't know if I have a marker, so I'd write the word out. I don't think I have a marker. The word is whakawhanaungatanga. It means building and relationships. In the middle of that word is the word whānau, which means family, as most of you know. And so we're talking about building relationships in the way we build relationships in a healthy family. And that's what we're talking about here when we go into our work in the health field. or health-related fields. How do we build those relationships, not only with our patients, with our clients, but with our colleagues, with the people that we work with? And that's really critical. Oh, thank you. That's the long word. That's a really important word that we use in Māori. The other word that goes along with that is manakitanga. Manakitanga is about hospitality and caring. So when you're caring for somebody, which is the work we do in health, for Māori, that takes on the meaning of hospitality. How do we care for them in a way we would welcome a guest into our home? How do we take care of their needs? How do we take care of them as a person? The thing we have to realize with so much diversity in our population is, how do we care for them as a culturally located person? We have to realize that the home we go to, if we're Pākehā, or if you're American like I am, the home you go to is very different from the home that many of your clients and patients will go home to. Different languages are spoken, different foods are eaten, different celebrations are celebrated. The rituals in the home may be very different. The way things are celebrated may be very different. Realizing that is very important, because assuming that everybody does things the same is a really dangerous assumption. Or assuming that my way is the right way and other ways are the wrong way is another dangerous assumption. Those are the kinds of assumptions that led to the original colonization of New Zealand and in the United States also. So we don't want to repeat that in our work. So being aware of that is very important. It's not easy. And that's why when I first came to New Zealand, I was working at a school. And I was at Raglan Area School, and there's three parts to the school. There's a mainstream school, there's a bilingual bicultural school, and then there's a Kaupapa Māori school, which means totally in Māori in terms of language and culture. Well, I thought I'd do fine in the mainstream school, although I didn't always understand Kiwi English. I thought I'd do okay. The bilingual and bicultural, I thought maybe I could get by. But I had no idea how I was going to get along in the Kaupapa Māori. So what I did is I went into there, and the leader of the school, Quentin Brown, left the room. And immediately the students started asking me about life in America. The first question they had, you know, consider my age. Do you know Snoop Dogg? Well, that's funny to people like me, because first of all, America's so big, your chance of meeting Snoop Dogg is about zero. And secondly, I don't really know who he is. So, I mean, it's not somebody people my age know about. But they had all kinds of questions, so I made a deal with them. I said, if you will teach me Māori, I'll answer your questions. So for every question you ask me about life in America, then you've got to teach me Māori. So that's how I began to learn Māori, was from the kids. That's also how I began to be able to work in their school and to understand what was going on. So that's the kind of thing that is very helpful, is to learn from these people what matters to them. What do they need? And we do that through the building of these relationships. How many of you have actually been on a marae? Oh, good. And have any of you been in participated in a pofari? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. All of those experiences are very helpful in understanding what matters. The pofari is a metaphor for the importance of relationships in not only Maori life in terms of the formal welcoming, but overall for Maori. So keeping those things in mind will help you in your work. Any questions so far? So what we do in our work, we do most of our work in schools, is we spend an enormous amount of time building relationships first before we ever start doing any, quote, work. If you go to a hui on a marae, and if you're coming for the first time, like I was when I first got here, and the pofari lasts 2 hours, and then you have kai after that, and already it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're saying, when are we going to get started doing the work? That's the orientation that I'm talking about. The work started at the beginning of the pofari, because that's when the relationship started building. But I didn't recognize that. I was ready to jump in and say, okay, I came here to do this, when are we going to get started? So it took me quite a while to learn. One of the things one of my Kiwi friends told me is, I asked him what he was doing on the weekend. And he said, do you plan your weekends? And I thought, that's an interesting question. I said, of course I plan my weekends. He said, I think that's interesting. You Americans plan your weekends. You don't just have a good time and let it happen. And that's how task-oriented we are as Americans. We have our whole weekend scheduled, not only for ourselves, but for our children. And so we don't just enjoy the weekends, relax, let it happen, because we're so task-oriented. And that carries over from our work. We don't have time for chit-chat. We don't have time to build relationships. For Maori and other indigenous people, that's number one. You'll notice that I've put some citations here to articles. If any strike your interest, I'm going to give you my email address at the end, and you're welcome to email me, and I can send them to you. I could also send you the slides. So one of the things that we use, whether it's in a workplace, whether it's in a home, whether it's in a school, is what's called a talking circle. And if I can get some help passing this out, this is something you can have. It's a script for how you do a talking circle. Here, I'll put it over here. And it's a way of creating the same kind of relationship building that we create with the pofari without the formality. The key to a talking circle is a talking stick. This talking stick was carved for me by a master carver, a Maori master carver. It's made out of Mighty, is it Maitree? The very hard wood here in New Zealand. It's a lovely wood that has both the light and the dark colored wood to represent the different people. At the top is the representation of Ottawa. We might use the term God. So here are the eyes of the people, and this then would be the representative of the tongue. Now for Maori, the tongue is sacred. So this part of the stick would be tapu to, for instance, touch the floor with it. You wouldn't want to let that happen. So this talking stick was given to me over 10 years ago at a Porpora Aki, a farewell ceremony that I had at Raglan Area School. And I've used it all over the world since. So I brought it back to New Zealand, first of all to go back to Raglan Area School and show them and tell them about it. But I wanted to bring it to you today. I'll pass it around so you can take a look at it if you'd like. And the purpose of a talking stick is so that one person talks at a time, the person holding the stick, the rest of the people listen. That's very important in our society. We tend to all talk at once or over talk one another. The other thing that we like about the talking circle is there's no one who has more power than anybody else. We all sit around the table with equal power. The third thing is everybody gets a chance to participate because we pass the talking stick around, we don't go across, and we give everybody an opportunity to talk. That doesn't mean that people have to talk, but when the stick comes to them, they can either talk or they can pass the stick to the next person. So what we find is those people that often don't get a chance to talk are able to talk. Anybody that's been in a classroom knows that often what happens is you get one or two students that dominate the conversation. And then you get students that you never hear from. And sometimes they're the wisest students in the classroom, but you just never hear from them because they're overshadowed by the other students. So the talking stick allows everybody equal chance, and that means that you'll hear from these students quite often, which is really a wonderful thing. So we use the talking stick a lot, not only with the children, but with the staff, with their families. It's a great tool to use in your workplace, great tool to use with your colleagues when you have issues. So what we're going to do is practice what we call a community building talking circle. We use it on our college campus with new students in dorms as they get to know one another. And do you call them dorms here? You don't call them dorms, do you?
Yeah, kind of. It's the halls of residence.
Halls of residence?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We call them dormitories or dorms. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Enough American movies to help. Anyway, so we use it with students, and we use it for 3 reasons. So today we're going to demonstrate the community building, which is kind of a welcoming, getting to know one another, building those initial relationships. The second reason is to set the norms. When you're living together in a dorm or any work setting or any other setting that you have, a family, work, school, you want certain norms that you're going to agree upon for getting along. The third reason that we use them is for problem solving. When issues come up, problems come up, this works quite well. So those are the 3 reasons that we use them. So today, I thought we'd just demonstrate with one another the welcoming, getting to know one another aspect of it. It's a little difficult for us to get in one big circle in this room. I can't think of a way to do that. So why don't we do it at each table? You can use a pen or another object as your talking device, your talking stick. And what you want to do then is pass that around. I'd advise you to state your name. If you want to say a little bit about yourself, but particularly share something about yourself or your background that the others don't know, so they can get to know you just a little better. And so you can get the feel for what this talking circle is like. We just need one person to volunteer to start it. That's all we need, and then we can go from there. Are you okay with that? I see you're by yourself. Do you mind moving over with one of the groups? This group has a lot of people, so maybe one or two of you want to shift to another table so that we have kind of an equal amount. This table needs a couple of more people. Okay, let's make the shift and then go ahead and demonstrate the circle. Thank you. We bet. Appreciate it. Isn't that pretty?
Yes.
Oh, sure. If you want to join in. You're good? Okay.
Thinking that she's got it off.
Sure.
So you and I will have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm fine with either way.
Mm-hmm. Are you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if I should stay and do the 2 to 3.
Okay.
Because I think her next lecture is going to follow on from what
You bet. Sounds good. You bet.
we're doing, which is basically just talking about the history of the decline of Māori health.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome to stay if you want.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So we'll stop about 10 till 2, so they get a little break. Thank you.
No worries.
From India. Also, I just moved into a flat in town. I was playing basketball for like 5 years.
Has everybody got a chance to talk? Anybody that hasn't had a chance? Okay. Well, first of all, I'm interested in how many of you used a talking stick? This table, this table. Did you? And did you? Okay. Did you find it helpful? Yes,
I found it didn't really make a difference. Because we started off using the talking stick. And of course we were all like kind of listening. But then we went without it and it was one person talking at a time. So I guess maybe it's just the table itself that...
Sure.
Yeah.
So you were able to not have several people talking at once anyway. Maybe that's just well-mannered Kiwis, you know. Americans don't do that. If you come to Thanksgiving dinner, you'll see that happening. How about this table? Did the talking stick help?
I think it's the same as them.
Yeah?
We didn't have it, we would have still just...
Did you, was everybody able to talk? Okay. And you felt nobody was left out. Now, I'm interested in what did you learn about someone or more than one person at your table that you found interesting that you didn't know? How about at this table?
I found out that Ben was a chef. I didn't know that.
A chef? Oh.
So that's quite interesting.
And tell us more.
I've been a chef for 9 years before I started university. I've been overseas and worked overseas.
And you didn't know that about him.
No idea.
And you've been sitting in class with him. You see how important that is? I mean, that's an interesting background. I would find it very interesting. And I'd be inviting you over. Anything else?
Well, Libby and Thomas I already know quite well, so...
Okay. So you didn't get anything new from them?
Not so much new stuff from them. I found out Amy was a dancer, so...
Oh.
Yeah, hobbies that I didn't really know about. Thought to ask about previously.
Yeah. And did you folks learn anything about her that you didn't know? Not particularly?
I live with her, so I know a lot.
You already know.
Yeah.
Okay, how about this table? What did you learn about somebody that you didn't know?
I learned that Alice's favourite animal was a cow.
The cow?
A cow.
The cow. You need to come to the West, I guess. We have lots of cows.
I grew up on a dairy farm.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. So you did all that work. And you didn't know that about her.
No, I didn't.
So you're from the North Island.
Yeah, from the West.
From whereabouts?
Like Hamilton West,
Oh,
Hamilton.
oh yeah. Well, you know Raglan then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else about anybody else or anybody? Life can't be that dull. Okay. How about this table? Anything you learned that you didn't know?
We all love cats.
You all love cats?
Yeah.
Wow. You know, the first thing I learned in New Zealand is about the feral cats, I have to say. The second thing I learned in New Zealand, and I'll warn you, is cat fleas. We don't have them where we live because it's so cold. When you have the cold like we have in Colorado and Michigan, you don't have cat fleas. My wife got so bad. I was calling every exterminator I could find. I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. So that's the only, my two things about cats so far weren't too good. Otherwise, we had two great cats at home. I just never had heard of that. So do all of you have cats?
We've all grown up with them.
Anything else?
Canadian?
You're all Canadian?
No, Lorna is half Canadian.
Oh, I was going to say, you don't have the accent.
No, my mum's from Canada.
Ah.
Lots of family over there.
And whereabouts?
Mostly in British Columbia.
Oh, my favorite area. Yeah, I like Vancouver is beautiful city.
Yeah, my sister and brother live there.
Probably one of my very favorite cities.
And I love to visit.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Cats dominated the...
That was the, and you didn't know that before, that you all shared this same.
No,
Isn't that interesting? Now you'll. No, anyway. How about this group?
We have one American with us.
Yes, Katie's with you. Yeah.
And I learned about the health science as a major here, which I knew nothing about.
And what did you learn?
Well, it sounds like if you have a degree in that, there's lots of possibilities as to where you could work. You aren't just put down one particular path.
Like we do in America,
you can go several different ways. And that all of these students here have a very varied background. And they bring a lot of different experiences.
That's interesting. I imagine that makes for an interesting class when you have such varied backgrounds. You wouldn't find that in a biology class in the United States or something in an Is this a undergraduate course? Yeah, you wouldn't find that. No, no. You're very focused on science. Not very much variety, I have to say. Anything else that you learned?
Aaron has traveled for about 20 years.
20 years.
I suppose I have, yeah. I don't think about that.
Lots of travel, huh? Well, that brings a lot of interesting things to the course.
Certainly something to speak of.
Yeah. So these are the interesting things that we learn about one another when we're building relationships. The work that I do is called restorative justice. That's a term you may or may not be familiar with. But I bring that up because the roots of restorative justice are here in New Zealand. And particularly they're with our Maori people. This is the founding document of the work we do in restorative justice. In English, it's called the Daybreak Report. It was a report that was commissioned by a department that we no longer have. It was called the Department of Social Welfare. What do we call that department now in New Zealand? Family and Youth Services, something like that? Or is there another name for it now? Child, Youth and Family Services. But this is what it was called back in the 1980s. The people in this department were very concerned about how to relate with their Maori clients. They were failing at it. So they went to the elders, the Kaumātua and the Kuia, around the country and asked them to please help them to understand. And the elders issued this Daybreak Report. Frankly, you can't get a copy of this. I hope there's one in the library if you want to find it. I hold on to mine dearly because it's no longer in print. But this is where the work we do in restorative justice started. This is where we trace it to. And it's real important to understand that because the basis that we learned from this report is how to create and maintain relationships That's the real core of restorative justice. So not only how we create those relationships, but how do we maintain them, particularly when wrongdoing and conflict occur. The great example for me is middle school students. Middle school students are great at creating relationships and lousy at maintaining them. And it's largely because they don't understand how do you repair a relationship that's been harmed. We don't do a good job of teaching our children how to do that. And schools often don't do it. If something happens, they refer the student out and the student gets stood down or a detention or suspension of some sort. But the actual learning of how to repair the harm to the relationship does not happen. For Mari, there's a process called hui whakatika that led us to learn how do we get together, how do we talk about the situation, and how do we create harmony again. And that's where we in the Western world began to learn about restorative justice. The term restorative justice was first used by a writer in the United States called Howard Zehr. This is the seminal work. And it was directed to people in the legal field, primarily. So that's where the term came from, but the actual ideas came from Mari in this report. So when I finished my doctorate, I wanted to come to New Zealand because I had a theory about how we create a culture of care based on restorative justice principles. But I thought in order to really understand what I was doing, I needed to come to New Zealand and experience firsthand how these ideas were being implemented. And that's what brought me to Raglan and to the Raglan area school. It took me quite a while to begin to understand because I had to learn enough Mari to participate in things like a porphyry, a mihi whakato, and things like that, and understand what was going on a little, at least a little bit. But over time, it took me about 5 years. You can tell I'm a slow learner. I began to just start grasping a little bit. But those principles are the same principles that you can apply in health. The first principle has to do with dignity. Mari call it mana. Every person is entitled to their dignity. And none of us have the right to attack a person's dignity. So that when you're working with people in the health field, you need to separate the problem or the issue from the person. So you always want to focus on whatever the problem or issue is and not tread on them as a person. Now, Americans have a horrible habit of attributing ownership to almost everything. It's my car, my house, my dog, my cat. It's not the dog, the house, the cat. And what results from that is that we attach our dignity to the things we own. Now, as a professor, I'm very careful. I will never say your paper. I'll say the paper. And the reason is, I tell my students that this paper does not represent who you are. This is just one aspect of your life. I don't know the rest of your life. for the most part. I don't know your family life. I don't know what other things you do in the community. You may volunteer at different places. I don't know where your home is. I don't know the significant people in your life. So this paper that I'm grading is one little aspect. So my remarks and my critique of the paper is not being critical of you as a person at all. I wouldn't dare do that. So in the health field, we want to do the same thing. We want to focus on the problem or the issue and make sure that we're not at all attacking their dignity. So that's very important. The second thing is we want to realize that for some people, the world is more collective than individual. Americans tend to take a very me approach to life. What's in it for me? How does it affect me? But we notice when working with the Latino Hispanic people, they take more of a collectivist view. How's it affect my family? How's it affecting the people that I know and care about? What we find in the health field, and this can often be very frustrating, when you go to the hospital and you find you have 15 members of a family gathered in a room, wanting to be with the person who's ill. And those of us that have that individualistic notion are rather frustrated with, why are all these people in the room? But for people that take a more collectivistic view of life, it's very important that those people that they love and care about are with them, supporting them. It actually has a lot to do with their well-being. So we want to be aware of that and how important that is to people who hold a different worldview from what we may hold. That principle is sometimes called solidarity. A more collectivist idea, all together. The next principle that's important for us to understand in the health field that we learn from restorative justice is we don't want to do for others what they can do for themselves. So the old saying is, it's better to teach a person how to fish than to give them a fish. So what we want to focus on in the health field as much as possible is how do we build the capacity of people to take care of their own well-being? What we're famous for in American medicine is just giving you a pill. We don't do very much on how do you live a healthy life. We're really poor about that. And if you go to the doctor, they're not going to spend a lot of time helping you to understand how to change your life to be healthy. They'd rather prescribe you a pill and get you out of the office. So we want to look at that whole idea. How can we build the capacity of people to take care of themselves? How to look out for their own well-being. And that's very important. Projects like we have in New Zealand, like what's the anti-smoking project that's going on right now? Say that again? Smoke-free or something? I see it on television, but I forget the name of it. That's what I'm talking about. How do we build that capacity? The next principle that we get from restorative justice is how do we particularly care for those people who live on the margins of society. Those people that are poor, those people that often don't belong to the same race we do, those people that are marginalized in one way or another, those people that are vulnerable. And we need to particularly pay attention to those people. Now, this country it is a good example of taking care of those, because we have a health system here that's designed to do that. In America, we don't have that kind of health system. I became really aware of that when the movie John Q came out. I think that was the title, with Denzel Washington and his son needed a heart operation. I don't know if any of you watched that, but Denzel Washington was a frustrated father whose son needed an operation, but he couldn't get it because he didn't have the right health insurance in the United States. So he kind of held the doctors in the hospital hostage. So I was in New Zealand at the time, and I went to the staff room for morning tea at the University of Waikato. And I had several professors ask me, "We don't understand the movie." Now, I thought about that a lot. That movie is built upon a lot of assumptions that are true in America about how we treat people, but not true here. And it really points out the difference in how we care for those people that are vulnerable. So I think it's important that we realize there's great differences across the world on how we treat people who are vulnerable. The health system here is built on a system that is meant to help all the people. We have a lovely program for the infants where the nurse comes into the home. What's the name of it? Plunkett. Named after a famous doctor, actually. Was he from the South Island? Yeah, Dr. Plunkett. I don't know if you young people would know that, but what was his name? And where did he come from? Invercargill or some famous place like Invercargill, yeah. Well, they got the most famous mayor. I mean, he actually got in the movie, you know. But that is an excellent program. And I cite that all the time. I don't know if you're aware, Katie, but it's a program where all the babies in New Zealand, correct me if I'm wrong, are checked upon by this nurse that comes to the home about how well they're doing and how they're growing and progressing and so forth. Do they come once a month?
It's been a while since I've had to deal with them, but I think from memory it was about the first 6 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. And then they check every once in a while. They go to the doctor after that.
I'm not sure if it's funded as well as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
But you go at particular milestones,
Mm-hmm.
into a team fund.
And the results of that are quite obvious. The child death rate in New Zealand is quite a bit less than countries like the United States. So things like that are very important when you're considering health policy. And you'll learn more about that. But that's the kind of issues that restorative justice is interested in. So what I'd like you to do is take a break now, because I've gone over time. But let me get to the final slide. If you wanted a copy of my PowerPoint or anything, there's my email address. I also have a website at www.restorative.justice.com. But I thank you very much. Thank you for letting me come this afternoon, and I've really enjoyed it.